America, the world's greatest democracy, and at its heart, the vote, the will of the people. But how do you know if the vote is counted correctly? And if you don't know, then what have you got? Democracy? This is the story of a small group of citizens headed by a grandmother from Seattle. They set out on a journey to ask one simple question. How does America count its votes? What they found was secrecy, votes in the trash, and how to change the course of history.
Something broken in the promised land.
When people see what's really going on, there's no way we will allow this to continue.
It affects us all. Bev Harris lives in Seattle with her family. A writer, publicist, and grandmother, she knew nothing about computer programming or election systems. But when her county bought a new touchscreen system, she started to ask questions. The answers she got reveal a system in crisis.
You know, I had a life before I did this, and I never really envisioned becoming any kind of an activist or advocate. But sometimes something comes into your life and you know, well, if I don't do it, then maybe no one else will, and then maybe I don't want to bequeath that to my children. I put 3 words into a news search engine, voting machines and glitch, and found dozens and dozens of elections that were miscounted by the machines.
Bernecker, Gambaluka shows up. So we went down the row. We probably tested 15 machines, and I said, you know what, we don't have to test anymore. And that is when I said, oh my goodness, this is terrible. We can't count our votes, so how do we know this is right?
Because the casting of the vote is secret, it's rare to get documentary evidence of machines miscounting. But Susan's experience isn't an isolated problem. Computers count around 80% of America's votes. It's the counties that run elections and buy voting machines. So the make and model varies from place to place, but there are 2 major types. On a touchscreen machine, the software counts the selections you make on the screen. Optical scan machines read a paper ballot that you have voted, and machines read a paper ballot that you have voted.
7 o'clock, polls are closed.
The votes themselves are stored on the computer's memory cards.
This is the voter cartridge. This cartridge is very important, and it goes right into our bag.
There it is.
These memory cards are taken to a master computer, sometimes called the central tabulator, which reads the votes, adds them up, and then declares the winner. The problem is that you can't see a computer adding up the votes. So, how do you know if it's counted correctly?
Suppose we didn't have any.
It was not a web page, but it was more like a library or an online filing system. And it contained a bunch of different files, just like you see on your computer. And within those were more files, and within those were more files. And the files were amazing. They were things like the software specifications, the software itself, the drawings for the hardware, the user manuals, passwords in some cases. It was the crown jewels for Diebold election systems.
Bev didn't know it, But what she'd just found was a computer program called GEMS. GEMS, made by the Diebold Corporation, counts around 40% of America's votes.
So I began downloading these files, and throughout the night I continued to download them. Throughout the weekend I continued to download them. There were so many files, it took about 40 hours to download all the files there were. And then I knew I would be working on this project for a long, long time.
Up to this point, only the voting machine companies knew how America's elections were actually counted. When Bev downloaded the Diebold software, the wall of secrecy began to crumble. The Diebold Corporation claimed that Bev had stolen the software from their FTP internet site.
The FTP site was an unfortunate situation, I admit to that. It was a situation where that information was out there, it was captured, which was our fault. We made a mistake, and we readily admit that. Will it happen again? No, it will not.
I had never looked at software code in my life, but as a writer, one thing you learn to do is ask a whole lot of questions and learn as much as you can about things. I will say that I didn't want to go through it. I thought, you know, maybe I can cover this story without really learning how it works, but it wasn't to be. I had to actually learn how it works. After finding the files, you know, I sort of collected together some various computer scientists or computer programmers who could help me understand them. And Avi Rubin did an amazing study with 3 colleagues of his.
I got a call that the Diebold code was on the web. Bev Harris had found it on Diebold's own site. And so, you know, did I want to analyze it? And I said, sure. You know, I was very excited about the opportunity to analyze Diebold's code. And I think it's the first chance anyone had ever had on the outside to see what's going on inside of these electronic voting machines.
Dr. Rubin found that you could hack into an election without even knowing how the system worked.
The problem that Bev has discovered is a pretty significant security hole, and it does open the way for people to really seriously manipulate the election in a way that's very difficult to detect.
But it wasn't just the Diebold machines that were a concern.
Sequoia, ES&S, and Diebold have the lion's share of the market. In fact, ES&S and Diebold alone have about 80% of the electronic voting market.
The state of Maryland had spent $55 million on a Diebold election system. They asked computer consultants Raba Technologies to test it. Raba were able to break into the machines in around 10 seconds.
I mean, what have they spent the $55 million on?
Accuracy and security and reliability of the equipment. Again, there's a perception there.
Well, it's more than a perception. I mean, these scientists broke into the machine.
I will tell you from what I read in the Raba report, and I've read it very carefully, is that the steps that they took and how they stated that they had affected the machine in an environment of an actual election would be virtually impossible.
Most states require that the voting systems be tested by independent testing authorities, or ITAs. But if the machines had been tested, then why were there so many security flaws? And why could they count votes backwards?
It seems I have friends, both in private industry, working for these companies, and working in government, that I don't know about and don't know who they are, who know there's something wrong. They're disturbed by what they see, and they want people to know what's going on. What I have obtained here, and these are hard to get your hands on, are 2 reports. One is for Vote Here, one is for Diebold GEMS system. They're both from Cyber, which is an independent testing authority. They have these extensive charts where they go over all of the different regulations in the FEC guidelines, and they have check mark after check mark saying that yes, they pass, they pass, they pass, they pass. Both of them are the same.
Just wing it. Just do what you do best, darling.
Andy was wired with a small camera. He and Bev wanted to be sure that their conversation with Sean Southworth was properly recorded, word for word.
Looking for Sean, software. That's you. Hi, I'm Deb Harris. I just had a couple questions.
Need to test all these things. It's cyber. Cyber is the one that's critical. That's who you need to be asking these questions.
Well, no, it's actually you, because your name is on all of the documents.
Now, all we do is in the FEC guidelines. That's what we do. And we write a report. We test the software, review the code to the FEC standards, and then we write a report. We don't certify, we don't recommend, we don't say this is the best stuff you've ever seen in your life. We write that report.
How do you deal with something where it accepts negative or minus votes?
We don't.
Doesn't that sound, you just go ahead and write a report? You write it in your report that that's a concern?
If you ask the EAC, who you should be talking to is who we write the reports for. We can't disclose our reports to anybody.
Right, and my question is on minus votes, because we now know that happened.
Do we put things in there that have that kind of wording? No. I don't know of any time that I've ever put a report out that would say that, because first of all, anytime we write a report, the system's gone through the testing. And first of all, the vendor's not going to want a report that has something negative in it. Okay. So they will retest and retest and retest and retest.
Citizens of America.
On July 11th, 2004, during a raid on Diebold's own trash in McKinney, Texas, Kathleen found some of Diebold's internal accounts.
This is some of the stuff that we found actually in McKinney, Texas, in the Diebold trash. I found an accounts receivable ledger. And in the accounts receivable ledger, I was interested to see the top item was actually money due to Diebold from the 8th District Republican Committee. Now that's interesting because this is not an elections office that owes Diebold, which would make sense because they've purchased election systems. It's a Republican political committee paying Diebold. We have a right to ask why they are collecting receivables from the Republican committee.
Come over into his business practice, and he has committed to keeping a much lower profile when it comes to those types of activities because of that statement.
You know, people talk about partisan ties to the voting companies, and they're right. That being said, we're also seeing that it's not quite as simple a picture. We have the state of Maryland and the state of Georgia have Democrats very tightly wed to use of the Diebold system, and it's the Republicans who are fighting against it there. And in my own home county, Seattle, King County, Washington, it's the Democrats who are pushing these systems and the Republicans who are a little bit skeptical.
The new battleground was California, the center of the computer industry. And the Secretary of State, Kevin Shelley, was getting worried about security.
As you know, about a year ago, one version of the source code of the Diebold TSX system escaped your control, and some months later was investigated by a group headed by Avi Rubin, Professor Avi Rubin of Johns Hopkins University, and they wrote a report which found numerous severe vulnerabilities in the code that they saw. I would like your general reaction to those reports before we go a little more deeply.
Basically, the code was stolen. In there is passwords. In there is our encryption technology. Okay, now, you know, I'm not a rocket science, but let me tell you, if somebody steals the key to my house, the first thing I'm going to do is probably change the lock. So that's what we went ahead and did.
That's exactly, as you know, the code wasn't stolen. It was left on a public FTP site by your own company.
The code was lifted off of our site, sir, and we still believe it was
downloaded
stolen.
from. You know that.
Okay.
You see, there's something called release notes. It's a legal document. It is something that must show everything you did and did not change when you put out a new version. I obtained the release notes for GEMS. They did not fix any of the problems. This stuff was never corrected. I don't know what to say. How can you have a company say we want secret software that nobody, even the county registrars who are here testifying on their behalf, is allowed to look at? And when you look at it, you find flaws, and then they say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, so you turn it over to scientific panels. They find flaws, they say, oh, don't worry about it, we corrected it, and that's a lie.
Bob Urosevich, Diebold's president, did offer this statement defending Diebold election system, and she got legal threats.
It was truly a difficult time, and it's the kind of thing where, you know, it kind of can make and break a marriage. I was very lucky that my husband was absolutely behind this because, you know, here we're looking at each other going, not only do we have no money, but we could get sued by the vendors because they think their stuff needs to be secret, and we could lose everything. And he simply said, you know, my family's been fighting for the right to vote. My husband's African American. He said, my family's been fighting for the right to vote for 6 generations. And we're not going to stop now.
In California, it was only the touchscreens that had been decertified. The central tabulating software, GEMS, was still in use.
Now, the central tabulator is sort of the one machine to rule them all. It collects all the votes. And every company, not just Diebold, has this central
to be changed. So imagine you can go into a box and essentially rewrite history. And there's no record of you rewriting history. And the only record of the history itself is the thing that you changed. And that's pretty scary to me.
Bev and Hugh worked out a way to demonstrate the insecurity of GEMS. She was invited to appear with her computer hack on national TV with former presidential candidate Governor Howard Dean.
All right, Bev, show me how to do this.
Well, what we have here is the central tabulator computer. Now, in a voting system, you have all these different voting machines at all the different polling places. All those machines feed into the one machine so it can add up all the votes. So, of course, if you were going to do something you shouldn't to a voting machine, would it be more convenient to do it to the 4,000 machines or to just come in here to one machine and deal with all of them at once? The GEMS program is the program that is the central tabulator program. And I'm going to put in a password here. Okay, we're in now. This is the official program that the county supervisor sees. As we can see here, Howard Dean has 1,000 votes, and Lex Luthor has 500. So you're beating Lex Luthor, and we're
2-1.
Yes, and Tiger Woods unfortunately doesn't have any votes yet.
All right.
All right, let's close this out. I was just showing you the legitimate way to go in and look at votes, which of course you can't tamper with. Go to the Start menu, and I'm going to show you something tricky. And I want you to go to My Computer and just click that. And you're going to see go to Local Disk C and go to Program Files. Go to Central Tabulator Votes and then go to the sum of the candidates, which is that table. You see we have 800 votes here for you and 400 for Lex Luthor. Let's just flip.
We, like a lot of other organizations, had a voter helpline where people could call in and let us know the problems that they were experiencing. We logged in over 200,000 calls, and many of those people left a voice recording of what they actually experienced.
When I made my selection, it jumped from the square that I touched to the square above.
They said half the machines were broken.
There was one voting booth, one, for 3,000 people.
7.5 hours in line to vote.
And they put 2 machines in another area with only 300 people and gave us 2 machines with 3,000 people.
And they have a lot more in the outlying, richer communities, and they don't have lines there.
I'm hardly around the first of the 3 rooms that I have to wait. The line is out to the street.
4 to 5 hour waits, you can't do. You can't do that. Women with children having to stand outside in the pouring down rain.
There were a lot of people who ended up not being able to vote because they just couldn't stay in those lines. There were a lot of elderly people there.
It is not the people who do the choosing. Everything is so fixed. It's so fixed.
There is a calamity going on out there about how elections are conducted in this country. And it results in less voter participation and potentially a lack of accuracy in who's either elected or what decisions are made in the polling places.
As the precincts closed, the poll workers switched the machines to reporting mode, signed off on the results, and took the memory card.
In America, it is vital that every vote count and that every vote be counted. But the outcome should be decided by voters, not a protracted legal process. I would not give up this fight if there was a chance that we would prevail. But it is now clear that even when all the provisional ballots are counted, which they will be, there won't be enough outstanding votes for us to be able to win Ohio. And therefore, we cannot win this election.
People were stunned. John Kerry had promised to challenge the machines and amassed a network of lawyers to protect the votes. And then, Kerry stopped any investigation by conceding, less than 12 hours after the polls had closed. Cliff Arnebeck, an Ohio election attorney, spoke with John Kerry shortly after.
A call from Senator Kerry comes into the hotel room, which a group of us are there meeting with Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson puts his phone on the table, hits speaker, and we're now in a conversation. The first part of the conversation is a dialogue between counsel and Kerry. And part of that dialogue includes Kerry sharing the fact that in New Mexico, no matter what the demographics of the jurisdiction are, if the votes are being counted by optical scan machines, they're coming out for Bush. This is, to anyone who's familiar with the situation, this means Kerry knows there's fraud in that election.
And the optical scan machines are the clue?
Yeah, what he's saying is that it's the optical scan machines are being rigged to produce a result for Bush, contrary to what the votes the voters are casting. So this is not our conspiracy theory. This is not something we have to prove to Kerry. Kerry is sharing this as a matter of fact. Because Kerry conceded, the incredible resources that he had organized for potential post-election litigation was not in the picture.
Kerry conceded, even though the results were from software he knew could be rigged, and the independent exit polls had predicted his victory. Now it was clear that the citizens would have to investigate the election themselves.
Another 4 a.m.
Bev and black box voting decided to start in Volusia County, Florida, where Al Gore had received his negative votes in 2000. Bev wanted to start by checking the printed results from each voting machine.
Our election, I thought, went extremely well, and I'm very tickled about it because it was my final election to perform. I'll be retiring on December 31st. So you can imagine how I was praying to come out with a smooth election at the end.
I have one question. These are not copies of the signed ones. These are new ones.
Give out the signatures, first of all.
Now, one of the things we had asked for was the voting machine results tapes, copy of them, signed by the poll worker for Election Day, which was November 2nd. But the date was November 15th. And they were printed out minty fresh just for us, obviously. So what I was given was not at all what I asked for.
Let me check with them.
Great.
Lana, the original tapes off of the machines, are they still out in the warehouse, or did you bring those in at the warehouse? They're out in the warehouse.
We went to the Volusia County warehouse because we had learned that that's where the real poll tapes or results tapes from the voting machines were going to be. And we wanted to go there by surprise because we wanted to see what they were doing with them.
To see what the machines had done with the votes, Bev needed to check the printed poll tapes from all the optical scan machines. If you add up all the poll tapes and there is a mismatch with the official results, then you know there's either been a mistake or vote tampering.
Call Lana, call the sheriff's department.
Go ahead. Let's go ahead and get the news over here.
I think she told me.
Ballots, secrecy envelopes, poll tapes. We have a public records request for these. I don't feel too good about the fact that they're being thrown away. Show me a ballot.
Oh, you flip it out over a sample ballot.
You'll call the call Lana.
In fact, I'll submit a public records request for everything in this bag right now formally, and that way we can look through it and we can get back to you, and we'll be on our way.
You are going to pick up this garbage.
Sure we are, absolutely.
Do you need any bags?
Well, I'm going to grab these poll tapes, which I have an active public records request for, and I've had all kinds of problems getting them from the
You
county.
didn't get that poll tape from in that bag.
I sure did. And videotape it.
Let me see it.
Nope.
No, I'm not going to. I'll be right back.
Nope.
Probably
It's not the only one. I got others.
Basically, you're making a molehill a mountain.
You know, when you behave secretively, that's what happens.
It's no secretive. Do I come to your place of work and ask to see everything?
You're a public employee, and this is of an election.
There's nothing secret.
Signed.
Mm-hmm.
The number of votes for Bush are 520. On the A01, it's 211.
And that's a big, big discrepancy. You're hundreds of votes off between what we were given and what was signed. Okay, that's fine. We're going to put it back.
It's fine. So we're missing this baby, 733.
Yeah, that one. This is fine. Okay. So this is 90. Okay. So what is your one that you're working on right now?
723A01.
Well, some emails.
Meanwhile, round the back of the county offices, two sharp-eyed local residents were investigating.
That's amazing.
Hi. Sari.
Remove Ohio! Remove Ohio!
In Ohio, citizens were angry, claiming that the election had been fraudulently counted and that voters had been turned away illegally. They needed a recount. In the end, it was the Green Party's presidential candidate, David Cobb, who decided enough was enough.
I launched a recount in order to investigate the allegations of voter suppression and fraud that were pouring in.
This was a chance for black box voting to really find out how the votes are counted. And Kathleen went back to her hometown, Cleveland, in Cuyahoga County, Ohio.
In the promised land, a broken promise. In the promised land, something broken in the promised land.
Being that this was December, January, when the recount was going on, the snow and blizzards and traffic, we would laugh and say, well, you know, this is what we have to do to get our democracy back. We'll do it, although we would rather be home in front of the fireplace.
Cleveland, in Cuyahoga County, is the largest jurisdiction in Ohio, with around 1 million voters, large enough to alter the outcome of the presidential election. A swing county in a swing state.
What are you getting up so early for today, and what are you going to go do today?
We're going to count the votes and make sure that count is right.
The reason that I bought a camera is irrefutable proof. I didn't ever want to be misunderstood or misquoted, so that way there'd be no question.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Let me just introduce a couple of individuals. One of those individuals is Jackie Maiden, who is our elections coordinator. The ballot manager, who is Kathy Dreamer here also, who will be facilitating.
Cuyahoga was still using punch card ballots, counted by a computer running secret software. The only way of checking this computer's results is to hand count the ballots. Under Ohio law, however, you must first hand count a random 3% sample. You are only required to recount all the votes if that sample doesn't match the computer results.
Tell me how you feel about this today.
Well, it's exciting. Like you said, it's part of history. You know, it just, we do recounts all the time. It's not that big of an issue for us. It's just for the public to see it.
Recounts are not just for the public to see. The public is meant to check that the election results are correct. After all, it's their vote. Almost immediately, the observers suspected that someone had tampered with the ballots.
It seems like all the Bush and the Kerry seem to be like clumped together. So there might have been some pre-sorting.
Somehow those cards were manipulated so that they were grouped. And I don't know anything about how that happened. Nobody's been able to answer that question for me.
We've got about 2 more hours worth of work on hand-counted ballots.
And that's it?
And then we'll continue to run through the tabulation machine. And they're starting to inspect poll books, and everything's going very well.
Great, thank you.
And I did manage to capture all the election officials saying everything's running smoothly, everything's going perfectly. So whenever they say that, you know, they've done something to make certain of that.
Later, the county prosecutor charged that staff had counted a large number of precincts in secret before the public recount. Then they kept back the ballots that didn't add up, giving the citizens a 3% sample that wasn't random and wasn't legal.
What's the process by which the 3% of precincts?
The recount is nothing but a charade. It's a complete and utter waste of time. It's a bit of theater, if you will, and it was done, in my opinion, to ensure that there was never an actual recount conducted, but more importantly, to ensure that there was never an investigation into the underlying allegations of voter suppression and election fraud that took place.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the well-known and great state of Ohio seems to be regular, informed, and authentic, and it appears therefrom that George W. Bush of the state of Texas received 20 votes for President. Dick Cheney of the state of Wyoming received 20 votes for Vice President.
For what purpose does the member from Ohio rise?
I said, I object to the Ohio vote. And before they could ask me, I said, and I do have a senator.
There had not been a challenge to the presidential vote in Congress for over a century, and it was recognition of the failures and disenfranchisement in Ohio.
Has the senator signed the objection?
The senator has signed the objection.
An objection presented in writing and signed by both a representative and a senator complies with the law.
I raise this objection because I am convinced that we as a body must conduct a formal and legitimate debate about election irregularities. I raise this objection to debate the process and protect the integrity of the true will of the people. When I made a decision in conjunction with Senator Barbara Boxer to object to the Ohio vote, you would have thought that I shot somebody in the head and that I wanted something.
In Tallahassee, Florida, the supervisor of elections, Ion Sancho, wanted to be absolutely sure that when his computers declared a winner, it was because that was the will of the people.
The vendors have entirely too much power in the elections arena today. Election officials are really overly dependent upon the vendors. Vendors control what kind of technology may be offered in a state. We're essentially hostage to the financial desires of private interests to conduct the most public of our procedures, public elections.
Ion asked Black Box Voting to look at his Diebold optical scan system, and they invited computer security expert Harry Hursti from Finland.
This is a first. We're going to be looking at the machines, the real machines. That's a real system that's actually been used in real elections. So this is exciting.
Welcome to Tallahassee.
Hi.
Thanks.
Harry Hurst, nice to meet you.
Ion Sancho, Harry.
This is where we count the votes on election night. It's Thomas James. Thomas?
How you doing?
Very fine. One of the things that the vendor told us was that people would not be able to access this, that every time you entered into the system, that the system would record that.
Dr. Hugh Thompson and Harry Hursti believed that they could change vote totals without being caught. Hugh tried hacking GEMS, the computer's vote counting program. He used an election held at a local high school. Nadia Smith had come in second with 3. Hari realized that every vote is stored on a memory card before the totals are printed. So if you can hack the memory cards, you can control an election.
The real vulnerability has to be very, very close to the source of the information. In that environment, the only possibility was the memory card.
Hari wanted to find out what exactly was inside the Diebold ballot box. And so he bought a memory card reader off the internet. And within a couple of days, he found that the cards didn't just contain votes. There was a program or executable code.
Well, if someone would have told me that in this system there is a living thing, an executable, modifiable program stored in the same place as the very...
Bennett was on the brink of investing $20 million in Diebold systems.
It's a standalone system. Votes are encrypted. So if anyone tries to tamper with those election results, it immediately shuts down the system. So you've got built-in protection within the system.
I'm sorry, you've been very kind.
No. All right.
So far, you're doing fairly well.
Thank you, sir.
Bob Bennett was also the chair of the Republican Party in Ohio, the party that Diebold had raised money for. Citizens were there to record, observe, and hopefully make a difference. Among them, Kathleen and her college buddy, Victoria Lovegren.
Basically, I would like to know why. What were your decision rationale? For even your own criterion, Diebold does not win.
Well,
it's a bad decision, and it's gonna, it's gonna come back to bite you because you're already in trouble. People do not trust Cuyahoga County. They do not trust the recount here. You're in trouble.
right now, we are still in the process of completing the negotiations on the Diebold contract. We have made that selection. It's not likely that we're going to go back unless there's something drastic that happens in that and change our decision on that.
So Bev decided it was time to make something drastic happen. 3 months later, Diebold was back in town to complete the sale.
Knowing that Diebold was going to be showing up at a public meeting, the next strategy was to go there and get their head engineer on videotape saying, you can't change the votes on the memory card.
Could you phrase your question again? Can votes be changed using only a memory card?
No, I do not believe votes can be changed using only a memory card. That particular situation is detected by the software. The report that was written, that I have read, guesses that something like that might be possible, but says that they did not actually accomplish that or even test that.
These are very strong statements. These are statements that we took to be a challenge. These are statements that we wanted to find out if they were true or not.
And so Bev went back to Tallahassee to see if votes could be changed. For Ian, there was another reason to test the memory cards. As one of the most trusted Florida election officials, he had been appointed to oversee the 2000 presidential recount. The recount might have discovered why Volusia County's computers counted backwards to minus 16,022 votes. But when the Supreme Court stopped that recount, Ian was left with unanswered questions.
One of the reasons that interests me about the Volusia County situation and what happened there is that we in Leon County used the identical voting system, the Diebold AccuVote 2000. And in the 17 years that I've been an election administrator, my experience is that that kind of subtraction cannot occur accidentally. Someone consciously tried to affect that computer system and consciously tried to perpetuate a fraud, to steal votes.
During his research, Hari had discovered that Diebold's memory cards effectively allowed negative votes.
Well, then, go dead. What we're going to do here is modify one card and then bring it to the election supervisor Iyer Sanchez's office. Plug it as the real card in any election to the real election system and run ballots through. And that's the same system which have been used in a number of previous elections. And we'll see that what is the power in the ballot box. This should be just an empty box containing the votes, but it has more capabilities than that. So it's a very simple process. You just add the card in, you run the rewrite program, tell where to find the scanner, and tell exactly what file you want to be put in, and off it goes.
Hari's hack is a variation on stuffing the ballot box before anyone has voted. But this is always suspicious because you end up with more votes than voters. So Hari used 5 negative votes for one candidate and then gave the other one 5 positive votes. So as people cast their ballots, the total number of votes always equals the total number of voters. But was Hari right? Black box voting went back to Tallahassee for the ultimate test. Bev asked Susan Pynchon from Volusia County to observe. She too had found evidence of problems with the memory cards while sifting the trash from the Volusia County Board of Elections.
This is from Mark Early of Diebold, and it says, how did the number of memory card failures on election day increase from the 17 reported on November 3rd to 25? I don't know if we'll ever know why these memory cards failed, or if, see, one of the big questions in my mind is, did they actually fail? Or could they have been used for other purposes?
Hi, how are you doing,
Hi, nice
Susan?
to see
Good
you.
to
Hi,
see
good
you.
to see you.
Susan Berniker from Louisiana and Dr. Hugh Thompson also came to watch Hari's hack.
Hello, Dr. Thompson. Good to see you.
Always good to
Always
see you.
good to see you.
So I vote no.
I'm going to film myself voting.
Excuse me.
I'm going to mark this ballot no. Dr. Thompson?
I am going to mark this ballot yes. I've seen some pretty concerning things.
Well, it's down to you. You're the last voter, Harry.
All right. I think it could be. So I vote for yes.
You will be the second yes.
All right. Ian, here is the memory card I have touched.
Okay. Now, this is the only piece of Diebold equipment that you've used.
That's correct.
Well, thank you. Let me take your ballot in. This card will go into this slot. The next activity that the election worker does on the morning of the election is turn the machine on, making it live to receive votes. When you do that, this machine will produce what is called a zero total tape. The machine is going through a self-test analysis, and then it will spontaneously turn on. This is Harry's card that is telling us that there are 0 votes stored in the memory. Okay, let me get the ballots. Let's insert a yes ballot. We're going to put in another no. 7. And the I think we, as election officials, need to be a little bit more demanding from the vendors as to the technical specifications of this equipment. The vendors are driving the process of voting technology in the United States. I would much rather, at this point, I think, focus on allowing citizens to select technology that satisfies their needs.
Diebold accused Ian of foolishness and apparent negligence insisting that only authorized people should test their systems for security. They said that the hack did not change their minds after the hearings, and spent $22 million on touchscreen and optical scan machines from Diebold.